had to dust the dust on off the microphone. It has been way too long. Won't even say how long it has been, but I am back. Welcome to the Graceful Growth Podcast. I'm back, and not quite maybe in the way that one might think. I am here to give my testimony. It's something that has been placed on my heart by the Holy Spirit for some time now, and I have felt some shame for this for so long, but you can only tell stories about how the Lord has redeemed you if you share what he's redeemed you from. And shame only keeps the darkness in the dark. And I want to bring it to the light because God is the light that shone through me to redeem me from what I've been through. And I also felt compelled to share my story because I think I have gone through something that I feel a lot of women actually do struggle with, but it is not something that's discussed a lot, really at all. It's a lot placed on the man, and it just, as I talk through it and everything like that, I hope, and my prayer is that it will release some people from bondage to know, okay, I'm not the only one going through this. I'm not the only one who's faced this. I'm not the only one who dealt with this, but even stronger, oh, God can redeem this. God can use me still. I'm not something to be thrown away. I'm not too dirty, too broken, too messed up for him to use me and redeem me. He wants you. And I just want to share for somebody. So the next few episodes, I will just be going through each part of my testimony. I've actually recorded it once off of my phone, but I do feel the quality just needs to be better for what I am trying to achieve right now. So I went ahead, and while my laptop screen is still broken, I am making this work with what I have because I do have the materials needed to do this. It just takes a little bit more finagling, and so that's fine. And so I'm going to get to it with that. And it's actually nice to be back in front of the microphone again with the headphones on and everything. I'm feeling good. Might not be feeling good for too long as I go through my testimony and everything like that. There is some uncomfortable parts in it for sure, but it's all worth it. Paul says that if I never knew Jesus and I got everything back that I had before, I count it all as nothing. Like I've lost it all. And that's truly how I feel. Like if I were to go back to times that I felt like were quote unquote better, than now, because they seemingly looked better than they are now. If I didn't have Jesus, it means absolutely nothing to me. So anyway, I want to share how I even got to that place. And another thing that I want to mention as well is that if you are listening to this, it's by design. It is on purpose. It was placed in front of you for you specifically, because one thing that I will be doing here is that I am not promoting that I've released any of this. It's just going to be out there. Because one thing I've asked continually of the Lord, especially in this season, is to keep my heart pure and on him. He knows me intimately. And one thing I've always been maybe like weary of, in a sense, is the influencer culture. It's not something that I want. I never wanted. One, I don't like people like in my business like that, just in general. And I'm not saying this is like, who are you to have people in your business? It's just when you're sharing vulnerable things, people think that they have a right to maybe state opinions that weren't asked for. Or pass judgment on things that they really don't have full context for. I think we all need a reminder that social media is really what people just want you to see. You never have the full picture unless you know that person in real life. And even then there may be things that they're keeping from you. So I've always been weary of that about my online presence being greater than what it is now. And not to say that it is great at all, but just for more people to hear more personal details about me, has always kind of made me uneasy. Additionally, the promotion of anything that I do is not really something I've ever been good at, nor have I wanted to be good at, simply because I don't, when I start feeling like I'm obligated to do something, I no longer have a desire to do it. I don't want to play the algorithm game. I don't want to put trending audio on anything. I have something to say and I want to say it, and whoever hears it. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. So when I've been feeling called to state my testimony, and I have at times felt embarrassed about some of the things that I am going to say here that are in my past, and some things that I'm still working through that can't be considered my past yet. There have been things that I don't want to share, but I have a duty as a follower of Christ to be obedient to the Holy Spirit. And if he said to share this testimony, that's what I need to do. He didn't ask me how I felt about it. And so I am sharing because, and quite frankly, to think about it now that I'm saying that out loud, if there was somebody around me that was sharing what I'm about to share, I think that would have helped me. That would have broken some chains for me to hear. And not to say that they can't happen if you don't hear my story or somebody else's story like that. But I just feel that sharing what you've been through relinquishes the shame from it. And you never know who you're going to help or who's going to listen to this and feel a sense of not relief, maybe that they've gone through it, but a relief that they're not alone. What we crave the most in this life is intimacy. That's literally the way that we were built. And to feel like you're alone in something is definitely a crippling feeling at times. And so if I can do anything to alleviate people of that with what I have to say about what I've been through, that's what I want to do. And I think it's funny that one of the first things that I ever posted on my Instagram of the podcast before I even posted an episode is shame dies when stories are told in safe places. Ann Voskamp said that. I'm not sure if she's the first person who said that, but that's where I got the quote from at the time that I posted it. That's one of the very first things. And this was before I even knew where this podcast was going to lead me. I just knew that it was something I needed to get started. And where it's led me now has been very interesting. But I think the fact that I even posted that and not knowing that I would one day on this podcast share the dark things that I have gone through, I just feel that goes to show God's ultimate design, whether we know about it or not, whether we can see the big picture or not, which most of the time we can't. It was always there. And I'm sharing to relinquish the shame. I want to bring it to the light. And I'll preface this by saying as well, I don't want anybody to listen to this and think like, okay, like, well, I've been through worse. Like, I understand that people have been through worse than me. But I'm also going to tell a story and somebody is going to be like, man, she's been through worse than me. It's not I'm not trying to be in a competition of trauma with anyone. I'm here to share my story. And if one person listens to this and can relate to any piece of my story, which I am like 99% sure that there's going to be something in here that you relate to, especially if you're a woman, but there's going to be something in here that you relate to and that you will find some freedom in knowing that you are not alone and to knowing that the Lord redeems me of that I've done what I've done what I've been asked. And And I think in the Christian community in general, I feel sometimes we don't share stories because they're not the, I don't want to call it Hollywood because that makes it seem like it is like with this dramatic flair, but my testimony can seem boring to someone who has gone through something more traumatic than me, if that makes sense. If we're putting it on a scale of like who's been through the worst, my testimony can seem boring. And I think that people who have quote unquote boring testimonies are shamed into not telling their story because they've been made to feel that what they've gone through is minimal. But if God has stepped into your life at any point in time, nothing he's done for you is minimal. He's a big, big God. Nothing he's done for you is minimal. And so I want to share that as well, just to start it off. And it may not be for you. That's fine. Just as a note, not every single piece of content that you see on the internet is actually for you. And in those situations, you actually don't have to comment. That's a story for another day, but this may not be for you, but for whoever this is for, I hope my prayer is that this helps you. And so with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get started with my testimony. So I will put a layer of like trigger warnings, if you will, on each of these episodes. But for the most part, as a whole, some triggers here are infertility, a little violence, there's some sexual content in here that I'm going to talk about. There is some self-harm discussed as well. And just to give you a note, like some of it you may be uncomfortable with either because you've been through it or it's just not something that you've experienced before. But as a note, that's what we're about to get into. And so without further ado, I'm going to start my testimony. And of course, as most of everyone's testimony, I would have to say begins is probably like a little bit before they're born, before they're conceived. The Lord knew who you were before you were conceived. And so I have to talk a little bit about my parents. And there are going to be some bits and pieces that I do not discuss in depth because I feel that they are part of other people's testimonies in my story. And I don't want to assume anything about what the Lord has done for them or what the Lord was doing for them in that time. So when I mention someone and what they were going through or how what they were going through pertains to me, I'll specifically be talking about what was going on with me. I think everyone in my story has some testimony of their own. And so I will do my best not to speculate about what was going on too much with them unless it directly pertains to me. So part of this starts with my parents. And I've noticed that when most people share about their parents, I'm mostly sharing this to give you an introduction on how I was introduced to the Lord. And when I say introduced to the Lord, that doesn't mean that I had a knowing of him from like the very beginning of my life. And forgive me as well if I jump around in here some, because there's some things that I want to touch on and like teach about in this moment because they are foundational to what I am saying. You are called, if you're called to be a Christian and follow Christ, if you are called to that life, you are called to have your own relationship with the Lord. This is not a relationship that's founded on your parents' relationship of the Lord or what your friends' relationship of the Lord or your spouse or anything like that. You are supposed to personally have a relationship with the Lord. And the best way that I can describe this is if you have a friend and they have another friend that they talk to you often about, that doesn't mean that you know that friend. You know of that friend, but you don't really know that friend. What you know is the version of that friend that your friend is giving you. You know, and furthermore, it's their perspective of that person. But you do not have a relationship with that friend to be able to say that you're friends with that person. And I think a lot of Christians, let me not generalize. I think that there are some Christians that have based their relationship on with God on what their parents' relationship is, but they don't know him themselves. And that's a dangerous place to be in, because your understanding of God is dependent on how somebody else has perceived him. Imagine if somebody decided that they didn't like you based on how your like worst enemy perceived you. That's probably not accurate. Actually, I'd venture off to say it's not accurate. That person doesn't like you, so their perception of you is not going to be a positive one. That's a dangerous place for somebody to base their relationship with you, or base what they know about you off of a conversation that they had with somebody else when they don't know you. It's a very odd thing as well. And you would be very thrown off by that. So like, that's what you're doing when you say, oh, I don't really want to have anything to do with God. I see how other people talk about him. Like, well, what? That doesn't mean that you know him. Like, they may be misled about what they know about him, which is why you were to seek him yourself. And I'll get into how you seek him yourself, which we know is reading scripture. But that I preface that by saying, while I had a knowledge of the existence of God, I did not have a relationship with him until much later in my life. So the Lord has always had his hand on my life, I will say. And I say this, my early childhood story begins from before birth, but also at the start of my earliest memories. So some of this I am telling as a retelling of what was told to me. So if you listen to my Mother's Day episode with my mom had an ectopic pregnancy before me, and not to even get political or anything like that. The fetus before me was not viable. I believe the only reason that my mom knew that it was an ectopic pregnancy is because she was feeling an intense amount of abdominal pain. And in that time, I think this might have been like maybe 1992 or 1993, somewhere around there. Ectopic pregnancies are not viable, and if ruptured, can cause sepsis in the mother and ultimately death. So my mother had a procedure to ensure that did not happen, and was in just an intense amount of pain. It is a very painful. Ectopic pregnancies are not like normal pregnancies. The fetus develops outside of the womb, which is not where the fetus is supposed to be. And it's not an enjoyable experience at all. It is extremely painful. So my mom carried, I would say, probably a little bit of anxiety in the first couple of months carrying me, because when I cannot speak for this from personal experience, but when I speak to other women, my peers that have gone through infertility or miscarriage or anything of that nature, stillbirth, when you do find out that you're pregnant again, there is an anxiety there about whether that baby will go to term or not. And I'll say previously, my mom's doctor before, with the ectopic pregnancy, said that she would not be able to have kids again. And she got a new doctor, of course, and then became pregnant with me. I was formed in the right place, and I was a full-term baby. Additionally, the doctor that my parents had for me, he was super nice man. He actually just retired recently, but super nice man, and was like, basically heard my mom's story and was like, oh, that's no issue. You can have children. Like, basically, like, no need to worry about that. It's a done deal. You're fine. And my first sonogram, like the very first sonogram of me, you can see the due date on there is my actual birthday. So I came not from a induced labor or anything like that, or a C-section. I came naturally. My mom's water broke on my birthday. I was born on like the actual due date there. So my dad, when he tells this story back, he's like, yep, the Lord was over that. I knew everything was going to be okay. You were formed in the right place. It was going to be fine. Like everything like that. So I think what's important, especially when you think back to your life of where maybe things could have entered that impacted you later, whether you knew it or not. It's important to recognize little pieces there. I think that the anxiety that my mom faced, I think was there with me while she was pregnant with me. Just not knowing how the pregnancy was going to go. I think my mom was very happy, but I probably in the back of her head was, is my baby going to be okay? So there's that's there, as well as my parents, I think, and I only say this because I watched some home videos of a couple of days after I was brought home from the hospital, and it's a VHS recorded video, and I'm watching it, and my parents are actually like having like a little spat, like about, I don't even know what it was, but they're kind of having an argument. And I remember like watching that and like at first like being happy to watch it. Just, seeing me as a baby and like, I'm seeing things that I have, of course, no memory of, that my parents like remember like it was yesterday. And just like, oh my goodness, I was so small, and like just, in awe of, creation and how a baby becomes, a full grown adult and everything like that. I'm just like amazed to be watching it, but to then hear this over in the background, like, which I'm clearly in the frame, but you can hear over the background them like bickering, and became saddened because I was like, oh, this actually doesn't sound much different than how you guys speak to each other now. I think I was maybe like 16 or so when I found that video. And I just remember like kind of watching that and being like, oh, so it's always been like this. So definitely a lot of discord in my home from very early on. And my parents also were not married at the time that I was conceived. Now, there's adding to the bickering that went on, there is a little story my dad tells about this, but my parents have 2 marriage licenses and one of them lapsed. So the first time that they got their marriage license, they were not pregnant with me, but they let it lapse because they were arguing about, I don't know, wedding or where it was going to be or whatever have you. I don't really know what was going on, but they let it lapse, and then they got another one. And by the time that they got the next one, they were pregnant with me. So my parents were not married, which I know that doesn't make me special. I know that there's a lot of people whose parents were not married when they were either born or conceived, or the parents never got married. But I'm stating this is my story, and I'm giving you all the pieces of what later manifests itself in other ways as I get older. So early childhood, I'm already discourse in the home. It's not something that I can say that I remember from an early age. Like my first memories don't contain that, but some of my first memories do contain some weird things, if you will. So from very early on, I've always been a very deep sleeper and a dreamer. Like I have very intense dreams, and I always have, which is fine when they're of happy things. But when I'm experiencing some dark things, they were very scary. They felt very real. I do not have them often anymore, but it is a very real and scary experience. And I don't know how to describe it really. I just, I asked a friend a while back, like I was asking a couple of people around the time. I'd asked Devin, I asked some of my friends, like, do you dream every night? And I remember asking one friend, and she was like, no. And like the way that she answered kind of threw me off a little bit, because I was like, what do you mean no? Like, you act like I asked you if you like clipped your toenails before you went to bed every single night or something. Like she acted like I asked something like kind of crazy. And so I was like, oh, okay. And she goes, do you dream every night? And I said, yeah. Like, and I often remember my dreams. And she was like, what? I was like, yeah, pretty vividly as well. Like sometimes I'll wake up and write them down, but like for the most part, I remember what I dreamed about. For the most part, I feel I'm in control of my dreams a lot of the times. And if I'm not, I don't know how to explain it, but I'm definitely like dreaming. And she described to me, she was like, do you actually rest like when you sleep? Because doesn't sound like you're resting because your brain's still on. And I was like, yeah, okay. So anyway, like and I've always dreamt like that. So I wanted to give that preface there. I've always, been that way. And I say that to acknowledge that from a young age, it was sometimes hard to tell in my sleep what was real and what wasn't. So I remember watching, there was some show that my parents had on TV. They were kind of like moving in and out of the living room, not really paying attention to what was on the TV. It was kind of background noise at that point. But I remember on the show, there was a woman who was on top of a man, and they were, while I couldn't see any body parts or anything, in hindsight, I know what was going on. They were having sexual intercourse. And I'm watching that, I would say probably at the age of like 4 or 5. And I remember seeing it and knowing that it was adult content, like knowing that like I shouldn't be watching this. I'm too little to be watching this. And thinking to myself like, oh, why this is late night TV. I must not be supposed to watch this, but also simultaneously like not being able to take my eyes off of it. And I was very intrigued by it. And I was like, wow, that was very interesting. And, it didn't last long, but it felt like it was on TV for a long time. Now, I cannot remember if it was that very night or if it was around the same time, but I had a life-size Elmo, like stuffed animal thing in my room. I had a lot of stuffed animals, but the Elmo one was like the size of me. I say life-size because it was my size at that time, at the age of like 4. And I remember like being like snapped awake out of my sleep. Like, that like instant, like, like wake up out of your sleep like that, but like in silence. And I remember waking up and I had this urge that I could not explain to do some acts that I really had no comprehension of at that time. And I remember, this sounds really crazy now that I'm saying this out loud, because I didn't know what I was doing, but whatever I was doing felt like it needed to be done in that moment. I had to do it right then and there. And I remember getting on top of this Elmo thing in the same way that I saw the woman on TV and doing what she was doing to the man that was on TV. And there's this girl I went to school with as well, and it seemed like I'm going off topic, but this goes together. She would take the bottom of her shirt, like a t-shirt, and like put it through the top of the collar and like pull it down to make kind of like a little like crop top bra. And I remember doing that and then like hiking my underwear up like very, very high to like get pressure onto me, on my parts. And then like almost performing in a sense, like on my door, like some like very like erotic dancing. And I'm 4 or 5 when I'm telling this story. These are one of my first memories. And again, at this time, I do not know if I am dreaming this or if this is real. I know in hindsight, this was real, but I felt like I was performing for an audience. I think that audience was a group of demons. While I couldn't see them, I felt that I was performing for someone, and doing all of those things. And then when I was done, I like went back to sleep like it was nothing. And I not to say that I didn't remember doing it the night before, but it wasn't something that was like fresh on my mind the next day. And that wasn't like a nightly occurrence. I didn't do it every single night or anything like that. There were like a few other times like in my childhood where I did something like that. Maybe 3 times total while I lived in that particular house. We moved from that house when I was 10, but that is when the spirit of lust entered me. And I would say it laid kind of dormant for a while until I got to middle school. And I'll touch on that when I get to my middle school time. But in elementary school, that was like a thing. And I didn't talk to anyone about it because quite frankly, I didn't know that what I had done was like physical. I didn't know that in the physical world, I had actually done anything. I just thought that I had some weird dreams. I had a couple of other moments that were just like, I don't even know how to describe them, but there was like something like when people say like, oh, I let my intrusive thoughts win. there was stuff that I was seeing that I had no business seeing, and then I was trying to act it out. And that's the thing about children watching adult content, is that they do not understand the context of which they are watching. And when they repeat the behavior, it is often very misplaced because it's not for them to be doing. I remember, like, I kissed my parents all the time. I still kiss my parents all the time. But when you're younger, I think you kiss your parents on the lips more often. And I remember, like, trying to kiss my dad and, like, involving some tongue because I saw that on TV. And my dad, like, looked at me like I was an animal. Like, he was just like, you can't do that. And then my mom, like, later had a conversation with me about, like, hey, like, you don't, like, that's not how you kiss your family members. And I was just like, oh, okay. But I had seen it on TV. Not really sure what I was watching, but I had seen it on TV. And then just, like, some other random stuff. Like, I remember my dad would, like, be reading the newspaper or whatever, and I would just, like, look at him and I'd, like, punch a hole through the newspaper. Like, it's kind of, like, funny now, but I'm like, what was going on with me where, like, stuff like that was happening? So, spirit of lust enters me from a very young age. And I will say, like, I'll this is, like, fast forward to, like, current life now. I definitely have, when I have talked to other people or seen other people talk about when they started doing, like, participating basically in, like, sexual immorality in a way, it enters from a very young age. It either by accident, like they watched something that they had no business watching, or because somebody defiled them from a young age, or simply because they saw somebody else do it. Like that, but it always starts very young. And the enemy, I don't have kids, but I have learned in this journey with the Lord that it is important to be watchful over your kids, because the enemy, it's easy. If you're a big bad wolf and you want something to eat and you don't want to work that hard, you're going to go after the babies. Because an adult might put up a fight. If I don't want to put up a fight, I'm going to go for the children. And I think it's easy for the enemy to corrupt the children when their parents are not watchful over these types of things. And I'm not sitting here saying that you need to go and tell your kids, like, hey, if you see this, you need to do, like, it's not like that, but just being mindful of what they consume. And I know you can't watch them all the time, but when you are with them, being mindful of what they are hearing and seeing in the things that they consume of content per se, because even though I didn't see anything explicit when I watched that short clip of that show, I didn't see anything explicit. Something entered me that shouldn't have been there. Something I shouldn't have watched that. I shouldn't have seen that, because I had no comprehension for what it was that I was viewing. And so I applied it in situations that I shouldn't have been applying it to, because it, quite frankly, was something I had no business doing, seeing any of that. So that's underneath there, like kind of in the secret place, if you will. Meanwhile, I think my parents this is probably the best that they were, like, the entire time that they were together. And I only say that likely because I did not know what all was going on, because I was a child and I was shielded from quite a bit of that. But I think that as I got older, things got worse, and I also was paying attention a little bit more. And so that's kind of like my early childhood there. I do have a struggle with identity, for sure, because I don't have a foundation in Christ. And so I want to take this time now to talk about my introduction to the Christian faith, which was mostly based on my parents. So we had a home church. I grew up in a Methodist church. And if you don't know anything about the Methodist church, the one thing that I can say is that they are on a schedule. There was no, we're going to be here for 2 hours. 8:15, wrap it up. 9:45, wrap it up. Worship's supposed to end at 9:10. Calm it down. They're on a schedule. And I was in, like, the general congregation with my parents. I didn't actually start going to Sunday school until much later, like when I was in 4th or 5th grade. but I started off in the general congregation with my parents, and I always had an understanding that God was real. However, I also thought that I was too small for him to care anything about me. And when I say care about me, not necessarily that he did not care about my well-being, but that he didn't care to talk to me. He has a lot of other, adults to talk to. Why would he talk to me? So that was there. And I remember telling my daddy, I talked to him mostly about God for sure. I think that my parents both wanted me to kind of have that foundation, but I think my dad took a bit more of an interest in it. And I remember saying to like, Dad, I don't think God talks to me. And I wasn't saying it like not necessarily like I was sad, but I was just, I think he had said something about like, oh, you got to hear from the Lord about it. I was like, I kind of got to a point where I was like, yeah, Dad, you keep saying that I need to hear from the Lord about it, but like, I don't think that God talks to me. And I remember him being a little stumped, and he was like, well, Bree, I don't think that God talks to everybody like in the same way. And he doesn't always talk like the way that I'm talking to you right now. And while I didn't fully comprehend that answer was enough for me. Like it was sufficient, because to me, it made sense. Like there's this God that I can't see. Of course he wouldn't talk to me like in an audible voice all the time, or like maybe anytime. I don't really know. So I think that same night I was in the bathroom and I saw a spider in my bathtub. And I live in Texas. To see probably anywhere, but like, especially after a rain, to see a spider in your house is like not unusual. I saw them often, especially in the bathroom, and I often killed them. I'm not opposed to killing a spider. I also am not scared of spiders. I'm not going to call my parents and be like, oh, you got to kill it. Now, if it was too large, then we have a different story. But like most like little baby spiders or whatever, I was like, oh, whatever. And I, killed it, no issue. And I saw the spider, and I remember a sound of like, oh, don't kill that spider. And I knew it wasn't coming from me. It wasn't my voice, if that made sense. There was something within me. And I thought to myself in that moment, was that God? Was that God telling me not to kill that spider? And I think that was my first time that I like truthfully understood, like, okay, God actually can hear me. He can hear me, and he can talk to me, and he wants to talk to me. But that didn't go much anywhere. But that was a foundational piece of kind of my understanding of the Lord. Like that was his first like breaking up of like, yeah, you think I don't care about you? I promise you I do. But again, here, I still don't have this foundation of what my relationship with God is supposed to look like. I said my prayers every night, which was like a repeated, like, now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep, and things like that. But I didn't witness a prayer life. I would read my children's Bible. And at that time as well, at the Methodist Church, there was a free edition of the Upper Room, which if you don't know what the Upper Room is, it's basically like a printed devotional where Christians from all over the world write a little devotional with a prayer and scripture. And my dad and I would read it every night before I said my prayers. So I have some of that, but it's very religious, if you will. It's not a relationship. It is religion. I do this every single night. This is the routine, but it's not I don't have a foundation of who I am, who Christ says I am, who God says I am, how he created me, I don't have any of that. It's like, I'm just supposed to do these certain things. All the while, there's some things in my childhood that, while my parents are, churchgoers, I won't say Christ followers, we're churchgoers, and we didn't go all the time. It wasn't every Sunday. And so I don't like to even say that I grew up in the church, because I didn't grow up in the church. I'm not a PK. I was at church, and also I went to kindergarten in the Methodist church. Actually had an academy in it, so you can do like K through 12, and I went to kindergarten there. So I'm getting fed more than what your average, I feel, 5-year-old probably is, who like doesn't go to church. Like I'm getting a little bit more than that, but it's still very much religious. Like we do certain things because like we're Christians, not because like God called us to, if that makes sense. So that's kind of what is going on there in my childhood. And my home life doesn't quite look like we follow Christ. There's definitely some things that there's always discourse in my house. My parents were not quite on the same page about me and my brother and our development and finances, and that as I got older started to come out a little bit more. And I don't know if it was because they were arguing about it more or not caring as much about if they were talking about it in front of me, or if I was just paying attention to it more because I was older. But there was definitely a lot of that. And my house from a very early age felt disjointed. I was not in a joint household. I was never in a joint household. So when I tell people, well, although my parents got divorced after I left the house, I still feel like I came from a broken home because they were not a unit, even though we were all in the same house. And so that's like my early childhood memories there, which like I never wanted for anything. I got all the toys that I wanted. I never missed a meal. I was always clean. I had nice clothes. Like my needs were met in terms of those material things for sure. I did not go without in any capacity. We lived in a nice home, but there were just some emotional pieces there that were missing. And so that is the first piece of my testimony. I hope that you guys enjoyed that there. I actually, just to go back, because I forgot to mention, and I feel strongly like when John says at the end of his gospel that if we were to fill every single book in this world with the miracles of God or with the miracles of Jesus, it still wouldn't be enough. Like we'd run out of room. That's how I feel when I tell my testimony of like all the places that the Lord had his hand on me. I forget even to say them in this moment. So, but another thing I wanted to bring up is that when I was a baby, I had rotavirus, and that's another piece where my dad like will tell me now that he was praying over me about that. And just stuff like that. So there is some prayer there, but it's not like I felt like I was taught to pray when things are bad, not necessarily to pray because that's how you communicate with God. And if you want to have a relationship with someone, you need to communicate with them. I do feel like I learned early on that we pray when something's wrong. So I wanted to add that there before I kind of close out. So that's my early childhood and everything of like how I started and how I first kind of encountered the Lord. So the next episode is part 2, and we'll enter into kind of like me finishing out elementary school and moving into middle school, and things like progressively get like a little bit more intense as we go on. So I hope you enjoyed that. I pray that it blessed you in some way, and I will see you on the next episode for part 2. Thank you for listening.